Well, Dr. Joe Rigney, thank you so much for hopping on with us today.
Hey, glad to be here, Ryan.
Absolutely. We're so happy to hear from you. So excited to join today. I know you are a pastor. You're an author of several books, which we will get into today. But typically here on the show up front, love for guests to share their stories. And so for you up front, we'd love for you to share your story, how you feel like God has moved into your own life, your testimony, so to say, and really just put us into your perspective, into your worldview. How have you seen God move in your life? How have you seen God shape you in your life? And how have you seen him bring you to where you are today?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in a Christian family, nominal Christian family in West Texas. And when I was around probably 7 or 8 years old, we moved from the church that I was raised in to the big Baptist church across town, and that's significant for my story because it's where my parents became serious Christians. I think it was when my dad became a Christian for the first time at all. He hadn't had much of a religious background. But it was there that they became Christians, which sort of altered the rest of my childhood as we were far more invested in church, things like that. My dad and I were baptized together when I was about 12 years old. Is when I made a profession of faith at that time, and we were baptized in the same ceremony. Which my dad passed away about now 12 years ago, and so it's a more significant thing as time has gone on. And then very young. I was, I would say, in junior high school, I was a very conscientious Christian kid. I wanted to be a real Christian. Having made the profession of faith, I wanted to be a real Christian. I was in a public school, but in a Bible Belt kind of town where everybody went to church at least somewhat and had a respect for the good Lord and the good book. But I wanted to be a real one. I wanted to mean it. And so I was really involved in Bible studies. I was active in our youth group. I would, when I had friends stay over, if they stayed over at our house on Saturday night, it meant they were coming to church with us on Sunday morning, whether they wanted to or not. Yeah. And so that, looking back, I think there was a lot of real good that was done, both by my parents and then just the Lord working in my own heart to want to be a serious Christian. I also had, I would say, sort of substantial sin issues. One was pride, because I tended to look down on others who I didn't think were as spiritual as I was. And then, one thing we'll talk about here in a little bit with sexual sin was an issue for me in my high school years. And so both of those kind of were significant hindrances, I think, to my spiritual growth. When I was a senior in high school, I was also an athlete. I played, West Texas Friday Night Light high school football.
Come on. Yeah.
And had a big time doing that. When I was a senior in high school, it was kind of the typical senioritis, I'm done with school, I can't wait to get out of here kind of attitude for the first half of the year. And kind of a significant spiritual moment was I was actually helping to lead a kind of a discipleship weekend for my church that was geared towards junior high students, junior high, lower high school. I was an older guy, so I was kind of more like a counselor, I guess.
Yeah.
And but man, God had other plans, so I thought I was there to lead it. And then listening to the speaker at the conference give his messages, and I just got absolutely leveled. It was on. He preached on the Apostle Peter and the way that God had to humble him. And as he was just describing Peter's, boasting and pride and, thinking he knew better than God and things like that, it just absolutely leveled me. And I found myself sort of, kneeling in confession. And that was a significant turning point. I think up till that point, I hadn't been sure what I wanted to do. After that, I felt a call to ministry. And it shaped where I went to college. I made a college decision differently. I ended up at Texas A&M, which isn't a Christian college, but I went there because there was a strong Christian community at the time that I had seen when I'd visited, and I said I want to be a part of that kind of Christian community in my college years. And so through my college years, man, I just grew by leaps and bounds. I just feel like and significantly in terms of the theme of your podcast, pruning. My freshman year of college, I would say I went off like a bottle rocket. I started listening and reading books by John Piper. So God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in him. And that just like resonated. I knew my Bible and I was like, that clicked. That gave language to things. I want to live for the glory of God. And so I just was growing by leaps and bounds, reading the Bible, growing in my understanding. And then I hit my sophomore year and had a significant, I don't know what you want to call it, a wilderness season. It was basically a low, dry time of spiritual doubt, spiritual depression. I took a class at Texas A&M Public University that was on the Bible. I think the professor's goal was basically to wreck the faith of evangelical
Sure.
kids, by
Yeah. Yep.
showing all the contradictions. And I wasn't equipped. I didn't have, the background or the knowledge base to be able to really sort through some of those things. But thankfully, I knew where to look. And even though I didn't always have the answers, I realized, hey, there's smart people, much smarter than me, who have looked at all of these guys' objections and have made it. So I'm just going to keep pressing on. I'm not going to just bail at the first sign of trouble. But it was a pretty low spot for that year, which the Lord then brought me through. And I think that's a pretty typical, my experience, that's a pretty typical pattern that the Lord puts people through, is take them up on the mountaintop, large, spiritual growth. It feels like you're just flying, and then all of a sudden take them into the valley, take them into the shadows. And are you going to trust God? You're going to remember in the dark what you knew in the light. Is it going to cling to you? Are you going to cling to Christ? Is he going to hold you? So that kind of took me through college. And then by the end, I knew I wanted to go to seminary, go into ministry. And so I got married right out of college, and we moved to Minneapolis, where I went to seminary at Bethlehem. So I studied under Piper there for a couple of years. And then while I was there, realized I loved the Word, thought I wanted to be a pastor mainly, but then really fell in love with the classroom and realized I think I'm really good at teaching in classroom. I still love to preach and things like that, but I also really love the classroom. And so that kind of shaped my overall vocation, which has been pretty much the same since about 2007. I would say I'm a professor by day and a pastor by night. So the day job, what pays the bills, my main vocation is as a professor of theology. I now teach literature as well and things. But I also am a pastor. I helped plant a church in Minneapolis. I was a pastor there for about 7 years, preaching about once a month. I'm now a pastor here at Christ Church in Moscow, and I preach, once every couple of months here, as well as traveling and speaking. So I still do a lot of pastoral counseling and premarital and that sort of stuff, but the main vocation's in the classroom. And the Lord's just been faithful all through that. So through now almost 20 years of marriage. I've got 3 kids, 2 teenagers, and a 6-year-old. And the Lord's just continued to be faithful through ups and downs, trials of life, the loss of my dad. He died of dementia when I was, 12 years ago, whatever that would be. I was about 30. And that's a significant event to kind of face. All of a sudden, it kind of it had been a long fight, 7 years. So really, after I got married, it was pretty soon after that my dad started to decline, and it was just this slow, agonizing death as there's less and less of him, and then all of a sudden he's gone. And so I'd say that's a pretty significant hardship that God has been faithful, both in sort of being the father that I lack in an earthly father, but also providing other older, wiser men who have been able to offer the counsel and wisdom. So my father-in-law has been that. I've had pastors who have been that for me and have really invested, so that fatherly wisdom and care has been communicated in other ways.
Yeah, definitely, man. I love that. Kudos to you, too, for staying in the classroom, because I don't know how long I could stay in that myself. But, man, you mentioned pride early on in your story. I'll tell you what, I used to play baseball at Liberty University, so I was an athlete growing up, played throughout all high school, and also kind of had that high school moment, where it's like, okay, maybe if I'm going to say I'm a Christian, I should really start taking this thing seriously. And I know, at least for me, there comes a point in your life, especially as an athlete, where you kind of walk so high compared to everybody else growing up. When you transition over to the faith, you kind of almost bring that with you, where it's like, okay, I've been used to competing, accomplishing, pressure, in this sports field. And so what does that look like as a Christian? Pastor Joe, how would you explain for someone who's maybe in this space, maybe they're not even an athlete, but they kind of see the faith as something where it's about performing and accomplishing? How do you get out of this self-righteous perspective and really lay everything down at the foot of the cross?
Yeah, it's tricky because, I think for my generation, I really do think, and probably for some even in the current one, that ambition can be a corrupting thing, and it can become competitive. to where you boast, you take credit for what God has done. On the flip side, one of the things I see a lot now is a kind of the opposite problem. Guys need a little more kick in the pants. So I coach right now. I coach high school football, and then I coach baseball as well. So for my sons, and one's a Christian team, one's the public school team, and it's interesting. How what we're trying to do as coaches is instill the desire to pursue excellence, but we do that by framing it around the way the Bible defines excellence. So as coaches, right? Paul says, "I will show you a more excellent way," and that excellent way is love. And so when we're coaching football, laying down your life for others is what love is. Greater love has no man to lay down his life for his friends. And we're like, that in football, that's what you're doing. Lineman, you're laying down your life and your glory. Nobody's going to talk about you. Your name's not going to get in the paper. You're laying down your body so that these other guys can get the glory. And that's good. And we want everybody to see that. Same time, you guys that make it into the end zone know that you didn't get there by yourself, that others had to contribute. And if you puff yourself up and boast over them, then God will humble you. So I think a big part of it comes with ambition is good. Men are built to pursue glory, but are you pursuing the glory that comes from men or the glory that comes from God? Are you pursuing excellence, and therefore the competition serves excellence, or does excellence serve your ego? That competition is about exalting yourself over others and then taking credit for it. So one text that has been significant for me throughout my ministry. As the Lord's blessed it, and you see fruitfulness, is when Paul asks in 1 Corinthians, and he says, "What do you have that you did not receive?" And it's because the issue is not you do have it, right? You do have those gifts and those talents and those abilities and those skills and those accomplishments. They're real. You did it. You got the grades. You scored the touchdown. You made the team. You preach the sermon, whatever it is, like you did it. But the question is, what do you have that you did not receive? And then the follow-up for Paul is, and the assumption is, I received everything. All that I have is gift. My abilities, my talents, my both mental, my physical, everything I have is just sheer gift from a God, and I don't deserve it. And so then Paul's follow-up is this, and if you received it, why do you boast as though you didn't? Okay. And so I think that's the key. It's not deny the gift. It's not deny the accomplishment. It's not don't pursue it out of some misguided sense of like, well, it's not holy to pursue excellence or be ambitious. No, it is. It's all right, what are you seeking first? Well, God says seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Yeah. So seek the kingdom, and then everything else falls into place after that. And if you put the first things first, you get the second things thrown in. You put those second things first, right? Then God takes both. He takes it all. And he does so because he loves you. He doesn't want you to wreck your life on these earthly baubles that in the end will turn to dust. Everything exists for the sake of Christ.
I love that, man. I think another thing, too, along with that, is a lot of people carry a sense of false humility where they kind of give that answer you just said, where it's, it's all God, and they kind of give the glory to him. But inwardly, it's like, I'm pretty proud of myself. I was talking to someone the other day. We are just so consumed with wanting glory and credit for ourselves, as a people. And I think, honestly, that and the self-righteousness ties in together perfectly. I asked a question to all of our guests, Dr. Joe. How have you seen God prune you most in and through your life? Typically what I'll do is I'll listen to their stories and kind of see what are the major things, they've gone through as it pertains to the faith. And obviously you talked about the death of your father, and would love for you to tie your answer in here as you look through his life, going through his death and really seeing how that's molded into who you are. What's the hope for the believer with the life beyond the grave? How have you seen God's goodness even through something as sad and maybe droudful as losing a father?
Yeah, well, I think it made me appreciate, his absence made me appreciate the memory of his presence in a lot of ways. He was by no means a perfect dad. He became a Christian very late in life, and so he was doing a lot of backfilling of things that he did not have growing up, and was trying to figure it out. But the thing that I think was significant is there's two things I always knew. My dad would be there, and he loved me. So and I think about that in terms of was he, by the time I hit high school or, late high school, early college, in terms of theological knowledge and even in some ways spiritual maturity, I was already surpassing him, right? In terms of like, I knew more, I knew the Bible better because I was studying it more. He was late to the game. He was, in his late 40s by that time, 50s. And so I was surpassing him in a lot of ways. So there was a lot of questions that I couldn't ask him. I had to go ask pastors and other people, but nevertheless, he was still my dad. And when I look back, it was like, man, anything I was a part of, he was going to be a part of. He wanted to be there. So that whether that was the football team, he was going to be in the stands. It was baseball, he was going to be there. If it was Bible study, youth group, he and my mom volunteered because they loved me and my brothers and wanted to be around us. Like they invested in that way. And so he was going to be present, and he was proud of me. He loved me. And so I've never doubted in my life that my dad was in my corner, which I think is that, in losing him, it was like there's a deep gratitude for that. Like there's things in the Bible that make a sort of intuitive sense to me because you have a dad like that, right? Where you're like, yeah, like God's happy with me because of what Jesus has done. That makes sense. I know what fatherly happiness is because I had the dad I did. Mm-hmm. So, losing him was hard. It was painful, but God filled the gap. When I think about pruning, honestly, though, from my life, there's that external thing. I didn't control that, didn't want it. But I think there were some key moments in my life, especially when I was in sort of mainly in college. I think about that period of time into seminary, where there was some humbling that had to happen, and it often came through peers. So I can think of a number of different times in my life where I had guys, some of whom knew me reasonably well, and others who didn't, but who had just seen things and felt, prayed for me and felt bold in the Lord to come and say, "Hey, I see some pride in your life." I remember one in particular when I was probably a sophomore in college. A guy I didn't know very well just took me out to coffee. He was a couple years older than me and said, "Hey, I see something in you, and I see it because I've been there. I've seen it in me, and it's this pride. You think that it's yours. You think that your intelligence and you think all of these things are yours, and you lord it over other people. You make sure they know." And at first, I remember hearing it and I kind of bowed up, but for whatever reason, I softened. I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna hear it out. And I think it was because he'd been praying for me. So by the end of the conversation, I knew this was he wasn't just popping off. He's like, "I saw it a while ago. I've been praying for you about it, and now I'm saying what I see, and I want you to just take it and do." And it was really a good check. And I think that there have been a number of times like that, where having brothers who love me enough to check me, having a wife who when she sees things similarly, right? She prays, seeks God, and then brings it and says, "Hey, this is what I'm seeing." And then I've had to cultivate a heart that says, it's a blessing, faithful are the wounds of a friend. This is good for me. This kind of, if I didn't have this, it would be a sign that God does not love me. But this sort of thing is their words are His discipline. They're seeing things, and that doesn't mean they're always right, but it does mean I ought to receive it humbly because I want more of it. And I think that's been a real significant means of sanctification for me. It's been how God has purified and made me holy is by resisting that defensive impulse when folks have brought forward issues, but instead I'm going to hear it out, consider it, weigh it, take it to God, and then have enough honesty, imaginative honesty to go, you know what, I think they're right, and there's some repentance in order.
I love that, man. That's really good. I think a lot of times when we have that correction, like you said, the immediate pushback is, whoa. Like, don't bring down my walls, But to have the humility to listen, I think is something, really a big sign of spiritual maturity. To get to our topic today, the elephant in the room, so to say, sexual sin. This is something, Dr. Joe, that we don't like talking about. I think it's something that we tend to shy away from because it's it's not a favorable topic. We don't like talking about this. You wrote a book. It's called More Than a Battle: How to Experience Victory, Freedom, and Healing from Lust. I'll tell you what, Dr. Joe, when I was an undergrad in college, I had to do a research paper on lust and pornography, and I found this book in the list of sources that I had in there and used it. And then when I knew we were connecting, it all came together for me. So it's really cool, kind of full circle moment there. But before we get into the book, tell us why is sexual sin such a prevalent idea in today's culture, and why is this such a danger in the life of a Christian?
Yeah, well, so sexuality is a key part of what it means to be human. God made us as sexual beings, male and female. He made the sex act the means by which the human race is multiplied. He blessed it. It was given to us for our good, and then therefore, like every other good thing that God gave, sin twists and corrupts it. And so sexual sin in that sense is no different from every other in that it's a corruption. But because it's such a great gift, and because it's so core to, the fruitfulness of the human race, when it goes wrong, it goes real wrong. And so at one level, sexual immorality is as old as dirt. The Bible's filled with it. It's filled with warnings against it of various kinds, everything from fornication to adultery to homosexuality, prostitution and the rest. I think and so in that sense, and every generation's had to face it, right? So you've got, brothels and temple prostitutes and the whole deal all throughout history. What's a little bit unusual about the modern world is the way that our technologies basically turn it up to 11. They take what is a, basic feature of human fallenness, sexual sin, and it hyperizes it. It dials it up to where it's even more potent. And so like, whereas, 150 years ago, were there, brothels where guys could go and sleep with prostitutes? Absolutely. It was a big problem. Politicians are trying to figure it out. It's an issue. But like now, like everybody's got a brothel in their pocket.
Yeah.
And that makes it, and it's accessible. It's anonymous. You can do it with nobody looking. And so that creates a heightened sense, and then it's endless novelty. I think that's the other thing, is the way that in our fallenness, our sexual drive gets hijacked by novelty. And so we want to see more and more and more and more and more. And it's very addicting. One of the elements in the book is the way that it basically hijacks, basically one way to put it is, God designed the sex act, the marital act, to unite a husband and a wife, right? It's meant to be a bonding. And so one of the things our bodies do is when we have the sex act, when we commit the marital act, and there's orgasm and all that, your body basically takes a snapshot of what's happening, because it's really pleasant. It's like all of the chemicals, everything gets released, and your body says, boom, what made that happen? I want that again. And if you think about it, like the wisdom of God in designing us that way, because the idea is, hey, here's a husband and wife bound together for the glory of God, for the procreation of children. And so here's this amazing sexual act that's designed to bind them together. And so it's like, take that snapshot and we want that again. What pornography does is it takes that, full body, embodied experience, and it abstracts the sexual pleasure and it puts it in front of a screen, anonymously, disposably, and then you still get the snapshot, but now it's a very different context, and therefore it weaponizes your body. It makes sin easier. The more you do it, the more enslaved you are to it. And the Bible, this is the way the Bible talks, right? That when we present our members, this is Romans 6, present our members as slaves of unrighteousness, it leads to more and more lawlessness. Like, it's just a spiral. It gets more and more enslaving. And I think a lot of people experience that with their sexual habits, with pornography and things like that. So it is a major issue because of the way that our technology weaponizes it.
Yeah, and we live in such a hypersexualized culture, right? It's like right at the grasp of our fingertips at a very early age. I think we don't understand the severity of what you're saying. Is when we have the orgasms, when we have these moments of sexual union, it really does connect us biologically to what we're around. There's an old story of that man who used to have a masturbating addiction, but what he would do is he would go out into the fields to get away from his family and his friends and all that kind of thing. What he would do is he put on these set of boots to walk out in those fields. And so he would masturbate with these boots on, right? And then supposedly the story goes, later on he gets married, he has a family and children, and he literally can't have sex with his wife, and he can't come to an orgasm unless he has those boots on, which is just a crazy story of it. That you would never think something like that would mean so much in the sexual union of an individual. Something I hear all the time, Dr. Joe, I'm sure you hear it as well, is the response of, well, I'm not really hurting anybody, right? When I'm in my room watching it through a screen, no one's getting hurt. It's not that big of a deal. Why is sexual sin such a set-apart vice in our lives?
Yeah. So, well, A, it's not true. You're hurting yourself. So one of the things, C.S. Lewis has a great section, a letter he wrote to someone who asked him about this. So if you know, like somebody asked C.S. Lewis, what do you think about pornography, masturbation? And he said basically, even if it's harmless in that sense, what it's doing is it's taking a drive, the sexual drive, which was designed by God to take us out of ourselves and to unite with another person in order to be fruitful and multiply. Like that's the drive, that's what it's for. And instead of taking it outside of ourselves, pornography and masturbation turns us back into ourselves. And basically he says we invent this imaginary harem of imaginary women, whether in your fantasizing in your imagination or on a computer screen, and it basically is a means by which you increasingly come to worship yourself. Because unlike real women, the woman on the screen or the woman in your imagination makes no demands of you, requires nothing of you, no sacrifice is necessary, no hard work, no labor, and so every other masculine muscle is atrophying, is like shriveling up and dying as you are just self-worshiping yourself through a screen, because you're seeing your supposed manhood reflected in the imagined sexual satisfaction on the screen. And so when you see that all of a sudden you realize, like, this is harm. It's harming you. It's destructive to you. In the long run, it will damn you. Like, God hates it. And so unrepented of, apart from Christ, like it's an evil, wicked thing upon which the wrath of God will come. But even in the short term, it makes real relationships hard. You're conditioning yourself to view women a certain way. Women are now no longer image bearers of God that you want to have a relationship with, one of whom you may want to marry. Instead, they're objects for your sexual gratification. Like, guys need to realize that when you're watching, one of our pastors here tries to kind of reorient us on this question. He said, if you were walking down the street and you looked down an alley and you saw a woman getting gang raped, and you started to be aroused and watch it, you'd think you were a pretty disgusting person. Why does anything change because there's a screen in between? Like why does the screen magically make it okay and harmless? Because every woman who's participating is having her feminine glory drugged through the mud, whether she's voluntarily participating or whether she's been trafficked into it. She's like, her feminine glory is being drugged through the mud and displayed for the vile desires of men. And like, part of our challenge is, we think it's just this little harmless outlet, when it's actually shaping and molding us into greater. And the other thing about it is, anybody who's ever worked with people who are deep into porn knows it gets more and more grotesque. The hijacking of it becomes more and more demonic, destructive. The kinds of, you get less and less aroused by even normal women, but you have to have more and more grotesque versions. And so guys get into, whether it's child pornography, whether it's sadomasochistic, whether it's homosexuality or trans stuff. Like, there's reasons that those other sins that you see out in the culture, in many ways, are influenced and shaped and fed by the widespread pornification of America. It's one of the reasons why, quite frankly, it should be banned. Like, it shouldn't be legal to do it. But it is currently, and into which it means in the meantime, for Christian men, it means you have to be what society isn't. Society is unleashing this hell on men and women, and you then have to stay. All right, I'm going to be different. I'm going to step out of this, and I'm going to be an actual man, not the fake man that I imagine myself to be when I'm sexually fantasizing.
Yeah, I think you're right. The root of a lot of our problems today does actually come from pornography, whether we see it or not. And I know the statistics are continuing to rise for women as well across the board. A lot of our listeners, Dr. Joe, are either young adults or college age. Some are even wanting to go into ministry. So it's kind of in that sect of college age individuals. And I don't think a majority would say it's not wrong to watch pornography. I think we'd all be on the same page with that. I do think there's another lie, though, that we believe, where it's like, yeah, I understand I struggle with it. I know a lot of people struggle with it, but I just don't see how it's possible to be free. I think a definition for freedom is kind of just up in the air in today's world. People don't really believe it's possible to be free from this sin. And I guess, my question to you is it possible to be free from something like this? And what does it look like to actually find freedom?
Yeah. So, I think one of the great tragedies, I read an article, I don't know, a year or so ago, where the author lamented, he said, one of the gifts that I wish I could give my kids, but I can't, is a public square, a public arena that was wholesome. But it's like it's no individual has the power to do that. And I've thought about it because as a father, I look at my boys growing up and I'm like, man, I wish I could give them a world where I didn't have to like constantly be trying to guard them from this and whatnot. But the flip side of that is, well, that's the world that God has given us. That's the times in which we live, and God gives grace for it, right? Like God doesn't put us in this cultural moment and then say, good luck, you're on your own. He says, I will equip you. There's grace for this. And it will require extraordinary moral effort by the Holy Spirit. So like ordinary, what in a previous generation would have been sort of ordinary Christian morality, in ours requires extraordinary moral effort. And the reality is that people who feel like there's no way to break free, in many cases, are unwilling to make the kind of basic sacrifices that it would require, because it would mean things like, yeah, you need to get rid of your smartphone. And people go, well, I can't live without a smartphone. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, so what you're saying there is your possession of a smartphone is more valuable than your holiness. And I do this when I'm a pastor. I have folks come in. I've written books on it. People want to talk about it. And one of the first things I always do is try to figure out what's the access point. And before we work on any heart issues, which we need to work on, what's underneath it, what's driving it, are there patterns of temptation that we need to work through in order to develop those spiritual muscles? I want to find access point. I want to say, we're just going to cut that off right at the outset. So is it your cell phone? We're going to get you a different phone. Or is it your social media? You're accessing social media? You need to delete your account. And part of the reason I do this is I'm trying to figure out whether they're actually serious about waging war on their sin, or whether they just feel bad for a minute. Because the way the Bible talks, the language the Bible uses for the fight with sin is violent. Jesus says, cut off your hand. Paul says, put it to death, kill it, mortify it. So this is not patty cake. This is not massage your sin, manage your sin, make your sin a little bit less. It's like, go to war. And it's like, well, if you're not willing to ditch your phone or delete your account out of a love for God and holiness, then you're not really serious. You just feel sort of icky right now, and you're hoping that a pastor will make you feel better. And I'm not interested in that. I think God wants more for you, and you don't know, like for a lot of people who are neck deep in it, they have a hard time imagining what like the joy of freedom would actually be, like to actually live in the air. Like, so for like a married guy who's dealing with pornography, what would intimacy with your wife be like if it wasn't tainted in this way? Like if this wasn't kind of hanging in the air in the mental background of what you're dealing with, what would that be like? It's like you're like a kid, Lewis used this image. You're like a kid who's playing with mud pies in the slum, and someone says, you want to go to the beach? And the kid's like, no, because he can't imagine how good that could be. It's a similar thing here, is that I think for a lot of folks who defend it or who settle for it, they can't imagine something better. And I just say, there's something better. And I would put the question around and say, well, how, okay, you think it's okay, or it's not that big of a deal, or there's no hope. How's that working out for you? Like how is your life actually going? How are your relationships with the opposite sex? How many are you having good prospects with women, or if you're a lady with the guys, like how's that going for you? Is everything good? You're happy with it? You're excited about it? It's fruitful? Because I think if we're honest, it's like the answer is no. And so then the issue is, okay, well, what has God given us? He's given us his word. He's given us his spirit. He's given us his church. He's given us means of grace. And he said, get to work, laboring in the strength he supplies in order to put sin to death and pursue holiness. And he's promised to bless it. And so that's what you have on the one side. And so really it's like the choice is yours. Now choose which way. Where are you going to go?
Yeah, that's good, man. That's really good. I think it's funny you mentioned the marriage conversation, because I think a lot of people think that marriage, especially young adults, marriage is just going to solve the pornography issue. Like once I get married, I can have all the sex I want, and I won't have to deal with these things. And then they get married, and it's like, man, you have like trained yourself for 10 years to like multiple people at once, And so then when you class down to one person, like, what do you think is going to happen? You've systematically trained yourself to like people through a screen, and then when you get into a monogamous relationship, like all the hinges are going to fall off the doors, And I think it should change a lot about the way young adults date.
Right. It's another example of it's not harming anyone. It's like it's harming your future spouse. You're conditioning your body to crave sin, to crave sexual gratification through screens and self-stimulation as opposed to marital union. And so if you think that that's just a switch that, because this is the reality, people think, oh, well, orgasm is an orgasm. And it's like, but it's not. Like there's like, because in a marriage, like there's a whole relationship that goes into us. There's the courtship and the wooing, there's the date nights, there's the conversations, there's the emotional connection, and then that culminates, yes, in a sexual union, but it's all one package. And you can't just think, well, I'll just substitute. I'll just like sub in and out, even though I've shaped my imagination in certain ways to be aroused by certain things and not by others. Now, the good news about this is the same. I can testify to this. The same mechanism, the same bodily dynamic that makes pornography, spiral out of control in marriage becomes a great blessing, because the idea is that like the more that you unite with one person, the more that you are monogamous, the more that you seek the more you drink from one well, the more satisfied, the more drawn to that one well you'll be, right? And that's true even as your spouse ages, right? It's like you go, but she's not as pretty as she was when she was younger, or she's starting to get wrinkles, she's had kids, all this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, it doesn't matter, because God has bound us together. And part of that binding, it's the conversations have bound us together, the life experience, the bearing and raising of children has bound us together, and the sexual union has bound us together. It's a whole package, and it's a really satisfying one. It's an amazing, it's like, and I think for a lot of people, like the question that I always try to pose is, if you could give yourself to another person, and they could give themselves to you, sort of totally and unhindered, just give themselves to you freely, and not only could they give themselves and you could receive, and God would smile over and bless all of it. Would you want that? Like, is that even something? Can you imagine that? Like, would you go, yeah, like if you're a woman and you're, serial dating and sleeping around or whatever, if you're a guy and you're looking at porn, whatever it is, and you go, yeah, but what if you could cut out the sexual immorality, and you did it, and you, like, God knows that our sexual desires are powerful. And so he says, I'm going to bind this with covenants and oaths before God and witnesses. I'm going to put big walls around this institution called marriage. And I'm going to do it because, why does he build those big walls? So that life can happen. Same reason you put walls around a garden. Same reason they put walls around a city. So that the walls protect the garden. They protect the city so that you can have real life in there. And it's like, do you think the walls are a hindrance to your happiness, or do the walls serve your happiness? And if you could have that to where the walls are there because you're faithful and they're faithful, and now you can give yourselves to the other person wholly and unhindered, and God is blessing all of it, and the joy is just there, like, would that be worth it to you? Well, and then if I said, okay, now in order to get that, for right now, you need to get a different phone. You need to get a dumb phone for a season. And it's like, would you not make the trade? Would you not at least give it a shot? Would you not, you know what I mean? And so I just find it bad. I find it like on this side of it, I know, again, like I mentioned, high school, college was a struggle when I was unmarried. God's been kind for these last 20 years. It's not like temptation goes away, but I've learned that I need to fight the temptation at a much earlier place, right? It's like, I want to be fighting the temptation when I notice things, when I call it sinful curiosity. Like, oh, look again, check it out again. Like, it's like, I want that to be the place where I'm fighting and repenting and seeking God's help, like that sort of thing. And if I do that, then any battles I lose are small scale battles at that level, as opposed to the big destructive battles of pornography, masturbation, adultery. Like, I don't ever want to even get close to that battle. And so how do I do that? I fight it at the top of the hill, and I don't let the big boulder of sexual sin get up a bunch of steam, and I'm at the bottom of the hill hoping that I can stop it right before it takes me off a cliff. Like, that's just folly. And so I'm like, I want to be at the top of the hill. I want to be pushing it back right at the outset. I want to be diligent and faithful to kill it and confess it, even in its little phase, in its little moments, and then see that God blesses everything else as a result.
That's really good, man. Attack the sin early
Right.
and then confess and kill the sin when you can. I love that. As we close, Dr. Joe, typically here on the show, I ask the guests to share something personal, maybe something that they're learning in this current season of life. I guess my last question to you as we kind of finish out is, practically speaking, what can we do to just put up guardrails in our life, to be smart about guiding our hearts, our minds, and what are some things we can further do to win in this fight?
Yeah, in this particular fight, I do think recognizing one of the images I use in the book has to do with protecting a city, and if you think about guarding a city, you got you're the watchmen on the walls, and that's like your conscience. They send up alarm bells when something's off, and if an army of orcs shows up on the horizon, it's a good bet that the alarm bells will go off. And so I think for a lot of guys or a lot of people, if you were just sitting at your house and all of a sudden the doorbell rang and a woman's there and says, "Hey, I'll come in and have sex with you right now," I think for most Christian guys, they'd panic and be like, "Just slam the door," right? Because it would be so overt. But I think a lot of us fail to recognize the ways that we allow little sins in one at a time. And so it's like, it's not an army on the horizon. It's like two guys are knocking on the gate and like, "Can we come in?" And you're like, "Oh, they look a little rough, but sure." And you let them in. And then the next day you let two more in. And then the next day you let four more in. And then the next day, and it's like, and all of a sudden, right, you see now here comes the army on the horizon, and you go to raise the alarm bell and the city's already burning behind you because you've let in these saboteurs. And so it's like, okay, well, how does that work in apply that metaphor, right? The idea is like your social media feed, right, is shot through with pornography. It's usually not, it may not be graphic, the sex act itself, but is it scantily clad men or women? Yep. Are they doing things that are pushing boundaries? And have you desensitized your conscience to where you're like, "Ah, that's no big deal. That's just, well, what are you going to do?" And it's like, well, not go there, like not do that. Like this is the place where like fighting the battle at the top of the hill. It's like, are you willing to put up the guardrails there and say, like I was talking to my son, who, he's in high school. He doesn't have like a full smartphone. He's got a Gab phone, which I'd just say that's a really good option if you're like, I need a phone. Gab, Pinwheel, there's a number of different groups that they don't have social media. They don't have browsers. They don't have social media, but they can call and they can text, and it's an Android. So you get the camera, you get a bunch of the other stuff. You can get the music. They have like a music service, but it doesn't have a lot of the other access points that the devil exploits to get us. So he's got one of those, and I was talking to him about it the other day because originally he'd wanted an iPhone, and we were like, the iPhone, you just can't lock them down. There's too many access points, And so he said, "No, we're gonna get you this." And I just asked him, I said, "How do you feel like that's going?" He'd also listened to a book called that I had him listen to called The Tech Exit, on just technology in general. And he'd listened to it. We were talking about it, and I said, "How do you feel now after listening to that book and what phones do to kids? How do you feel about us giving you the Gab phone?" He says, "I'm just glad I don't have to think about it." And just, like, in other words, like the fact that for him, his phone, he can text his friends. He can, there's a handful of apps that don't have any possibility of anything. He can listen to some music, and that's all he wants. And he's like, "I don't even really have to think about all the stuff that I would have to think about if I had a phone that had all these access points, guardrails, and my moments of weakness." And I just thought like that was as a proud dad moment right there for me to sit there and go like, good, he's getting it. He realizes that what initially probably to him, "Hey, you get to have this phone, not this phone," felt to him like maybe a little bit of a letdown. Now feels like, man, it's freeing. I don't have to worry. There's stuff I don't have to think about because we put up that boundary. And I think that that's the sort of thing that anybody could take advantage of.
I love that, man. How serious are you about killing and destroying sin in your life? That's a good word. Dr. Joe, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can our listeners go to learn more about you and then all that you're doing?
Yeah, so Joe_Rigney. I'm only on Twitter. I don't have any other social media, so that's the only place you can find me there. Canon, here's the thing I'd recommend for your folks. So Canon Plus is it's like a combination of Audible and like Netflix. It's got shows for kids and things like that, documentaries, lots of sermons and audiobooks and just, messages, good content. And it's just it's like a power up for like spiritual growth. It's like if you're looking for, hey, I got questions on marriage or family or dating. I've got questions on theology and Bible. I got questions on culture. There's just all sorts of resources there. And so it's a subscription service, Canon Plus. If you use I know this, Joe 99, you can get the first month for like 99 cents. They just threw my name in there. So Joe 99, a lot of my stuff's there. A lot of the other guys that are around here have different things. There's a whole course on fighting pornography. My book, More Than a Battle, is on there as an audiobook. So lots of really great content there. So I'd say if you're looking for something to help kind of boost it, canonplus.com, Joe 99, that'll hook you up.
I would encourage all of our listeners to check that out. Check out his book that Dr. Joe wrote. I know you just recently came out with another book, right? Please tell us about that.
Sin of Empathy came out earlier this year. Provocative title. How is our compassion hijacked and weaponized to get us to abandon what's true and what's good? And how do we resist that? Have true compassion, biblical compassion, and not this kind of untethered empathy that leads to all sorts of dark and destructive places because we enable people to do really evil things in the name of compassion. So that's the new book. Again, provocative title, but I think a really timely one for the moment we live in.
Absolutely. I love it, man. I would encourage all our listeners, again, check out Dr. Joe and all he's doing. Thank you again for joining us. I'm so grateful for you, and just praying that God continues to use you and your ministry in a mighty, mighty way.
Hey, thanks, Ryan.